responsible for AgriVie, which is a private equity fund focused on food and agribusiness, primarily East and Southern Africa. And I'm privileged to see some of the fund partners in this room. We had representation in our group from other investment, from the investment fund environment, and also from bankers, and particularly from the energy environment. A couple of key points which came out of our discussion. Firstly, we underscored the points that have been made quite a bit already in the panels and afterwards around the infrastructural constraints for agricultural producers and for the processors in the rest of the value chain. It is simply and clearly a very real issue. A simple statistic: if we could have eradicated the problem of post-harvest losses in sub-Saharan Africa, we could have done away with the last decades of food aid to this part of the world. That's a simple demonstration. But the issues around roads, infrastructure, logistics are very real and very pressing for entrepreneurs in agriculture and agri-processing. So we think the decision times around these cross-border infrastructural projects are too long, and as we've said so many times already, the implementation is lacking. It's taking too long. Two thoughts from our side in terms of ways to address that. Firstly, proper prioritization among the decision makers and in the sequencing of infrastructure projects, because there's a logic often in terms of what should be tackled first. And then secondly, we thought a strategy, a thought which we'd like to leave for further discussion is we think that it's a point for the growing generation of younger business leaders in agribusiness and in other sectors to become more assertive in influencing and having conversations with the politicians and other players in powerful positions to exert their influence in a more effective and concerted way. Three other key sort of points that came out of the discussion, one around land governance. The way and the consistency with which this valuable and currently ample resource is going to be managed in future will be a key determinant for investor certainty. We need a lot more larger scale commercial agricultural projects, and investors in those projects need certainty about land rights. At the same time, there's a need to properly manage local interests and not to upset the smallholder farming ecosystem, which needs to function in a symbiotic relationship with commercial farming. So land governance, we think, is a key issue. We think there's a need for more innovation in funding models, bearing in mind that a lot of what is happening in the food and agri sector currently, business-wise, represent younger business, smaller business. And our funding models in banking and even in equity is not innovative enough to deal with the risks and the needs of the entrepreneurs and businesses in that category. We were asked in our brief to comment specifically on corridor development. We found ourselves lacking a little bit in qualification to speak with authority on that subject. We think the notion of singling out certain strategic spatial development strategies makes a lot of sense. And we think it should be driven a lot more.
Doing business in Africa. You can't afford to be without Africa Investor.